Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi there, and welcome to the first in a special series of shows that we're publishing all of this week on the Art of Procurement. That's right, we're doing something a little different this week. We have a number of different shows. It's hopefully going to be 5 different shows to be published with procurement thought leaders. Each is going to go live one day this week, Monday through Friday. And the interviews aren't the typical Art of Procurement interview. So think of them as more of a mini or a bite-sized interview. I'm targeting around 20 minutes for each discussion. Although, to be honest, by if the first one is anything to go with, it was certainly a little bit longer than that. Because, you know, one of the things is that when I talk to these thought leaders, I have so many questions. It really is hard to keep it at 20 minutes. But these interviews are part of what we're calling the Big Idea Week here at the Art of Procurement. And you might recall that I recently posted a video a couple of weeks ago and a show associated with it, highlighting what was my big idea. And it was in support of Procurious's Big Idea initiative. I did that off my own back, but it was just something that I thought was fun and interesting and something I wanted to participate in. Well, the show was really well received, and so I connected actually with Procurious after I did that, and they've graciously made available a number of their keynote speakers from the upcoming summit, from the Big Idea Summit, to share the premise of the presentations that they're going to make to delegates. And so my guest today is Tom Derry, and Tom is the CEO of the Institute of Supply Management. Tom joined ISM back in 2012, and he's had a real varied career, I think, both across profit and not-for-profit organizations. Most recently, and just before he joined ISM, Tom was the Vice President and the COO of the Association of Finance Professionals. And he's also currently, right now, on the board of directors the Society for Human Resource Management. So with that background across finance, HR, and now procurement and supply chain, I think it's fair to say that there's few leaders in the procurement and supply chain space that have such an understanding of the role that we as procurement can play and what we do play in supporting an organization. So in our discussion, you're going to hear Tom share his perspective on really a broad range of topics. We cover anything from the challenges that CPOs are currently facing to the role of social media in procurement, and also his thoughts on whether procurement training budgets are on the rise or decline. And that's in response specifically to a concern I had based on an interview that I had a couple of episodes ago. You're also going to hear Tom share what he feels is the key skill for procurement and supply chain professionals going forward. And honestly, when I think about more softer skills, this wasn't something that I'd expected. So listen out, we're about halfway through the show. Tom will share his insights on that topic. So before we do go into the show, and if you find value in the content that we share here on the Art of Procurement, I'd love for you to sign up to receive a notification every time that a new episode is published. As a thank you for doing that, I really trust I'm really grateful for the trust that you place in me and giving me your email address and sharing your email address. I'll send you a report that has really resonated well so far with listeners, and that is the 21 tips and tricks to help you secure your dream procurement job. To sign up, just head on over to artofprocurement.com/subscribe, and you can leave your email address, or you can just look for the sign-up bar. We have our new website that's live now that has a sign-up bar on the front page. Pop in your email address there. That's on the Art of Procurement homepage. Before we go into the show, there's just one more thing that I think it's important to mention. And Tom and I struggled at times with sound quality just due to a patchy internet connection. However, the show's packed with such great advice that I'd hate for that to take away from the quality of the conversation. So I know there's a number of great takeaways from the call. If you're at your desk, I definitely recommend that you have that pen and paper ready to jot down all the notes that you're going to take. So with all that being said, let's go straight ahead and roll the tape. So hi there, and I'm excited to welcome Tom Derry, the CEO of ISM, or the Institute of Supply Management, to today's Art of Procurement show. So Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
No, thanks. And I shared some of your background with listeners as part of my introduction to the show, but I wanted to start with the first question that I ask most of my guests, and that's how did you get into procurement? Was it something that you chose, or did it choose you?
Well, it chose me
Right.
in an interesting sort of way. I didn't come into this job with any formal background in procurement or supply management, but I came from another not-for-profit organization, and which really dealt mostly with corporate finance-related issues.
Mm-hmm.
Was, was contacted about my possible interest in this role, and I was aware of ISM mostly through the economic data that it publishes, which is often the reason most people are familiar with the work that ISM does.
Right.
And realized just from my general understanding of what's happening in the global business environment, how important the supply chain is, and what a global platform ISM had, and that was a very attractive opportunity to me. So that's how I ended up being recruited into this particular role, and I've been in it nearly 4 years, and it's lived up to all of my expectations of intellectual opportunity to grow and advance and be influential. It's been really, really fun.
Well, I read something, I think, when you first joined ISM back, I think it's 2012, that your knowledge was a mile wide and an inch deep. So
Yeah, it might be 2 inches deep now.
Right. I was going to say 4 years in, a little bit wiser, I think. I was interested to just get your perspective on what you see now as being key priorities of leaders in procurement and supply chain and kind of how that's evolved since you joined.
Yeah, I'm very gratified in one sense that, the benefit of coming from outside the field as I did 4 years ago, like any situation where that happens, you tend to look at issues and problems and circumstances with a different lens.
Mm-hmm.
So I tended to look at some of the conversations that I was now privy to, from the lens of experience that I brought, and I began to frame some questions around financial impact of procurement and supply management within organizations, the dimension of strategy that's involved for companies that actually compete on the basis of their supply chains. And what I've come to find is that my initial instincts have proven to be pretty accurate in the
Right.
conversations I've had with now, leading CPOs from leading companies worldwide, which I'm very privileged to be able to say that on a daily basis. I talk with people within those ranks, and it seems that their point of view is very consistent with mine. We're talking about value management.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about risk as a topic more. We're talking about driving strategy as a topic more. Yes, the traditional emphasis on cost reduction and nimble and agile, versatile supply chains is still there, but it's not the primary focus necessarily, at least for what I believe in a leading organization.
And it's interesting to hear that because, you look at different studies and they all say different things in terms of the importance of cost savings. And I think it always is the table stakes, if you will, but it's encouraging to hear that value and risk is playing a greater role and perhaps that CPOs are having more success in articulating the value that we can bring over and above just saving our companies money on a piece price negotiation, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And I use this example from time to time. I was doing some research for a talk I had to give in Australia, and I was looking at the transcript of an earnings call that Ford Motor Company did. This is a little over a year ago now.
Mm-hmm. Bob
Shanks, the CFO, was asked about some of Ford's success in achieving cost reductions, which has always been a very traditional focus in automotive. And his answer was very, very interesting to me. He said, "We're proud of what we do at Ford. We're very disciplined. We think we're among the best in the world at it." And then he pivoted. He said, what we're looking for our procurement team to provide these days is innovation."
Right.
He pointed to navigation systems and entertainment systems, and he said, they're bringing this technology to us from the outside. And the really important point was we have pricing power with consumers now. People are willing to pay for these features in automobiles. And for the first time in a decade, we're actually able to obtain pricing leverage with consumers. So that's we're talking about introducing innovation and technology.
Yeah.
We're talking about great top line growth, and the CFO, who's traditionally a very cost focused, function, is talking about innovation and driving top line from procurement. To me, that was a very significant moment.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. So I've got a lot of background in the automotive industry, and I've actually worked for Ford in one of its variants in the past. And the fact that a company like Ford is talking about innovation from its supply base, and I think talking at such a high level that it's obviously very strategic to them, shows how far that we've come.
Well, I would agree, and that's why it was so striking to me.
Right, and so. There's a couple of areas that I wanted to dig deeper into a little bit. First was talent, and then secondly, the role of social media in procurement, which I know is a topic of your seminar presentation at the Procurious Big Idea Summit. When I think of talent, a lot of guests that I've had on the show, they've told me in interviews that we've got a talent challenge in procurement, specifically related to the changing nature, I think, of our role. So, first of all, I'm just interested to understand how you see the procurement role evolving.
Yeah, well, there's no question that the skills that are going to be required to be effective, let's say in the coming decade, are very different from the skills that were, able to, through which someone was able to sort of be professionally competent, let's say in 2006, 10 years ago. So, yeah, there's some core aspects of what we do in the job. We're always going to have to be able to negotiate well,
right?
That's not going to go away. But increasingly, we're going to be managers as much of data flows and information flows as we are of relationships. And so there's going to be a premium on people with very high value analytical skills, people who can process, not just personally, but through their own technology, high volumes of data, understand the data, be able to extract the insights from that data and then act on it, whether it's data that's going to be generated from information flows from product to logistics and shipment and transportation to warehousing. That we've got these inanimate objects talking to each other and communicating, the Internet of Things, whether it's customer data and point of sale data, depending on the industry that you're in. We have to be much better at demand planning and forecasting than we are. So I see real premium being placed on being able to analyze and make actionable the data over the next decade. And risk is another area. I touched on it briefly, but there's so much risk inherent in supply chains. We understand that, I think, intuitively, but we're not very advanced today in how we manage it. So looking at ISM on some ways in which we can isolate some of the discrete variables that contribute to risk in an extended supply chain, so that individual managers can then manage those variables, right? If inventory is building and you're in an industry where inventory obsolescence is a real risk for you, how do you know that, first of all? How do you track it and measure it, and what do you do about it? So those are the kinds of skills that we'll be highlighting. I'll just mention that ISM is in the process right now of conducting a nearly year-long massive research effort for the job task analysis as part of the refresh of our professional certification. We'll be learning directly from procurement professionals over the next few months, specifically how the skill mix has shifted. And you'll be hearing a lot from ISM on what we're finding. I think the findings are going to be pretty powerful for the whole profession.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting you mentioned data and the analytical side and turning we're now inundated with information and we don't have a clue what to do with it. We're not quite sure. We know it tells us something, but we can't pick the patterns out of it. When a lot of people, and myself included, you think about how we're evolving, you think more about the soft skills and the people skills. But it's not just that, is it? It's taking what we know inherently, because we're data-driven people, generally, if you're in supply chain and procurement, but taking that to the next level.
Yeah, that's the clear opportunity and challenge in front of us. Business acumen is another area. Really not going to be successful. Place your future career development on the bet that I can be a functional or technical specialist in a given area. It's not enough to be able to understand one market deeply. Soon that's going to be providing enough value. You need to be able to look at your company's competitive positioning in its industry, understand your supply market's competitive positioning, where people are headed. Professionals in procurement today are focused on executing the historical business, the legacy business, more efficiently, and not thinking about positioning the business for where it needs to be in 5 years' time. And what does that mean for my shifting patterns of procurement, for instance? The different mix of assets I'm going to need in 5 years' time. I mean, procurement, to my mind, really should be as much forward thinking about positioning the business for its future success and a lot less emphasis on executing the historical business more efficiently.
Right. And I wonder if, there's a lot of technology that's coming into our space that is essentially going to enable a lot of automation of the things that are what may be the bread and butter today, but that are managing current suppliers and current spend more efficiently and effectively. There's a potential for that all to be automated. So essentially procurement becomes, or the successful people in procurement will be those who can look ahead and figure out how to use a supply base and a supply chain to essentially help drive forward a company's vision, not working on the day-to-day things, because that all gets automated out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I would say that there's a real danger if in any organization, a public company, a public sector entity, a private company, if you are seen as the guardian of a process, your expertise is in executing a process, virtually all processes are subject to automation.
Right.
And should be, right? You just don't want to be there. And furthermore, you think about other roles within a large company. I'll take two examples that are pretty easy. Or I can think of three examples off the top of my head: internal audit, or accounting, or HR. They really struggle to gain any kind of recognition. And let's face it, they're executing internal processes that are necessary, but aren't the reasons that we're in business, and not the basis for how we win in the marketplace. Right? I mean, HR would probably take issue with my characterization, but and the best organizations, that's clearly not how HR is run.
Right.
But my point is simply that if procurement falls into that trap, because we're really great at managing the processes we manage, and maybe we're even best in the world at managing those processes, it's still a trap.
Yeah.
We need to be thinking about how we're driving the business forward, what my strategic contribution is. And if I let's face it, I know CPOs who do not want PO processing in their procurement organization.
Mm-hmm. Kind of enabling the business on a day-to-day basis, but it's not where you're going to provide you value. Because
that's right. Transactions have to happen, but let's not waste any mental energy on it.
Right. Something I'm interested in is I know that you launched a mastery model last year, which I think talks to a lot of the kind of new skills that that are going to be prevalent and they're going to be needed to help drive supply chain and procurement forward. I just wondered if you could give a little bit of background into that, because it's a pretty comprehensive model. I'd love to know a little bit more about it and kind of an overview of what the model does.
Yeah, happy to do it. We think this is very important, and on behalf of the profession, we developed it. First of all, it wasn't an ivory tower exercise. It was developed with practitioners, by practitioners, and for practitioners. So our model is universally applicable by design because, of course, we deal with all industries, both private and public sector organizations. Designed that way, we identified 16 high-level competencies, identified 69 additional sub-competencies underneath there. So that's actually quite a comprehensive list of 85 specific skills. Defined for four, what you could call generic stages of career development. So an individual contributor, an early stage manager, someone who's in their first leadership role, let's say a department level, and someone who's finally at an executive leadership role. And of course, what happens is the mix of skills shifts rather radically as a person moves throughout their career. One of the benefits of the model is it provides an easy to read roadmap for any individual about what do I need to master to get ahead.
Right.
I can now sit down with my supervisor and say, I really would like to become a director in this organization one day. What do I need to improve on to be ready for that opportunity? And now the director can sit down and say, well, listen, you're really going to have to perfect your skills and, maybe should cost modeling or something. And they can have this very affirmative and productive conversation around here's how you can add to your skill set that's going to add value to your performance in this organization and get you ready for the next opportunity. So the organization performs better and the individual's got an opportunity to advance, and everybody learns that conversation. The model is designed to facilitate those kinds of conversations. And similarly, it can be used just from an organization perspective, you can assess your team or your entire organization and identify gaps that are critical to your success and strategy, and then focus on closing those gaps.
It's a great initiative because a lot of companies don't have the ability to think about the skills that are needed strategically. They just don't have the scale to do so.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think is there that can be adapted perhaps based on individual company needs, but it's a real good base as you start to think more strategically about managing your talent through your organization.
Well, thanks. We're hoping to be able to help companies get further ahead on that maturity curve.
I read and I actually interviewed Brian Umbenhauer of Deloitte. I read their CPO study and we talked a little bit about CPOs are scaling back their training budgets. And so I wondered if, with the talk about how critical it is that we kind of develop and evolve from a talent perspective and a skills perspective, are you seeing CPOs scaling back on training? Is it consistent with what you see, or do you think it was just a nuance of that particular survey?
Yeah, I have not seen that, honestly, and we assist a number of companies with their training and development programs, and we're not seeing it flow through in terms of impact on our specific business at ISM. And furthermore, I think it would be short-sighted.
Right.
We're everyone knows that we're 7 years into a bull market business cycle. A lot of speculation about when it's going to come to an end, and is there a recession around the corner? If there is one, it's predictable that companies will focus on tightening their belts and focus on getting costs down, the cost structure right. In that environment, having high-performing people who can achieve those goals for you is only that much more important. I think you double down on training in an environment like that. You get more out of your people than you have, not less, by giving them more capability. And I think the best organizations will do that. I think that because you have to have tools to go out and realize your goals. You have to have capable people. And I think, so I would disagree with that finding.
Mm-hmm. And that's good to hear because, it really confused me for those reasons. I think that at the moment, even when you look at it from a bull market perspective and there's changing skill sets, there's the roles, the people who can fill those roles are few and far between. So when you get them, you need to be investing in retention because it's so hard to replace and those people are in demand.
That's absolutely true. And I would add one other element, which is that in the research I see that talks about, the so-called millennial generation and that people who are sort of in the early stages of their corporate careers at this point, everything seems to indicate what they value most is companies who invest in them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not their salary. It's not their compensation package and structure. They care about me enough to invest in me, to help propel me. And everything that I see indicates companies that do that retain people at a higher rate. So, if you're interested in bringing talent in and keeping it, the last thing you should be thinking about is using your training budget.
So I wanted to move on, and I know that you're leading a session at the upcoming Procurious Big Idea Summit, and talking about the role of social media in procurement. And I feel that when I talk to colleagues across our profession, there's people that either get it and can kind of immediately see its potential, and those that, for the want of a better word, don't yet, and that's probably because they're not active on social media. So just don't have the vision of what can be possible. So I was interested to understand from your perspective, what do you see the role or the potential of social media in procurement and in supply chain?
Well, I think it's almost impossible to overstate its significance.
Mm-hmm.
And I can give you a variety of reasons for that. But one of the most obvious from my point of view, so here I am leading one of the world's leading professional societies in our field. And when I think about the challenges that ISM faces in advancing its mission, which is to advance the practice of this discipline, what are our challenges? And one of them is we have to meet our customers and our members where they want to consume information, right? And where do they want to consume it?
Right.
Basically on their handset.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to consume it by peer-to-peer exchange, right? They want things that have been validated and vetted by their peers.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of trust that's placed in content that's peer-to-peer generated. And there's an absolute necessity that's available, like, basically you can use old school reference in a just-in-time way when I have a specific requirement for that particular skill. Uh, and also, frequently, just enough information. Don't give me an 8-week course on a topic. I need 15 minutes so I can get the next task done.
Right.
So social media is, frankly, as it should be obvious to all of us, is ideally suited to meet that kind of consumption of information intelligence. You can get access to your peers. You can get pointed to specific skills. You can get that just-in-time learning. You can get it in the right amounts to move you ahead, so you move on to the next task. So I don't see how anybody could seriously, an accomplished practitioner in our field, if they aren't using social media to accomplish those kinds of tasks.
Right, and I think from a talent perspective, it's interesting because, everybody, I know that when I go and if I was in the market looking for a job, I'd be looking at the people who I'd be potentially working with to see if they're active on social media, to see, learn as much as I can about them in a world where we expect to find, anything about anybody online. And I think if you don't have a presence, just from a attracting talent perspective, I think that's a red flag.
Yeah, and then as an employer, that's obviously another hat that I wear. I'm aware of the brand that we have. So people expect today that it's not just about this transaction around a paycheck, right? I put my 40 hours in or my 60 hours in or whatever it might be, and,
right.
and I'm happy to get the paycheck at the end of the day. They want engagement with their employers. They want to be aligned with the mission of their employers. They want to know what that employer's brand stands for.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very conscious when I'm, primarily it's LinkedIn. But when I post on LinkedIn, I'm conscious of telling a story that's as much about me personally and ISM as an organization,
right,
as it is about the specific professional topic that I'm addressing. I think is important for our community. So really, on all three levels, I think it's important to be aware of your brand and to manage your brand.
And something I've been interested in for a while, and I'm not certain what the answer is. Yeah, I kind of haven't figured it out, but it's the use of social media as an intelligence tool. So, for example, when it comes to research and when it comes to helping get ahead of risk, of mitigating risks. And I was at the Procurement Tech Summit last month, which I know was co-hosted by ISM and Spend Matters, and there was a company there that talked about using Twitter, for an example, or monitoring Twitter to identify potential supply issues in China. That, to me, I'm not sure if it's limited to a very specific use case, or you think that the use of social media to do that will become a practice that's more widespread?
Well, I know it is. There's a company called Elementum that uses to identify these very issues. So that is a great example. I may have a supplier in Shenzhen, let's say.
Yeah.
And I typically information is slow getting out of China to begin with, right?
Right.
If there's a fire in a plant, it might be 4 to 6 weeks before I become aware of that. Whereas the employees coming out of the building, tweeting in real time,
right.
Oh, hey, got the afternoon off.
Taking photos.
Yeah. Now I know, right? And now I'm able to react, and I've got advantage over my competitors potentially. So I think, frankly, it's a brilliant idea to tap into those Twitter feeds as a way of getting real-time intelligence. And there's so many other opportunities. I was talking to a professor earlier this morning, and he talked about some of the other ways that procurement delivers value. These sort of hard to quantify, somewhat intangible attributes that we really rely on, the best firms rely on from the supply base. How do you find those firms? You can find pricing information, you can find product information. Well, you need to tap into tribal knowledge really today to find firms who can deliver on those kinds of attributes. And you do that by working with your peers, particularly your peers who are not in a competitive situation with your firm. Hey, I'm looking for people you can rely on to deliver these dimensions of value.
Yeah.
That would be a great use case for using social media.
Yeah, I mean, whereas before it was just you looking in a catalog or something, or a very limited Google search. Now you can go and actually connect with people around the world, and they know their local markets. They can share with you their local markets.
Yeah.
So I'm mindful of time, and so I just have a final question, and it's a question that I'm going to ask to all of the guests that I am talking to during this series of Big Idea interviews, and it's just to try and kind of have an actionable takeaway at the end of our conversation. And that's what I wondered is one thing that you think a procurement professional can do today to help increase the value that he or she provides to their key business stakeholder.
Well, the one thing that I harp on and that I find creates a little bit of discomfort sometimes in the conversations I have is being able to directly link the work you're doing to your firm's financial performance.
Mm-hmm.
Too often we focus on really soft and metrics around, cost avoidance. And while I'm not completely discounting those as things that we should track and understand, I would encourage people to be able to more directly link the work they've done and affects earnings per share. It's not just procurement. There are a lot of corporate functions who are very uncomfortable stepping up to that level of accountability. But what we do clearly impacts the bottom line of our organizations. And we just have to be able to draw that linkage and accept the ownership for it and be proud of our accomplishments. And I think to the extent that becomes more widespread and prevalent, our understanding will continue to grow and develop with our corporate colleagues. You can't just negotiate a great deal and walk away from it, right? You've got maverick spend and you got compliance issues, and all in the whole process to drive the results.
And a follow-up then, because I could probably talk forever on metrics, so I'll just ask one thing. I don't think it has to be a direct, you've negotiated a cost reduction, that's the impact it has on the bottom line. It's working with your stakeholders to find how they impact the bottom line and what they do, and then the value that you've brought to help them do their job better, and tying it around that way. So it's not that we're limiting ourselves to we can only show an ROI on what we do through cost savings, but it's finding the impact of what we do and how it impacts the bottom line.
So I know one CPO who, and this is a rather novel approach, but she told me that, when she was new at a company, she would go in, she'd agree with the CFO on some cost reduction targets, but she'd say, listen, I can achieve a $5 million reduction for the marketing team,
mm-hmm.
but I don't want you to take that budget away. I want you to ask them for the business case how they're going to spend the $5 million to, be able to deliver even more value to the firm.
Right.
And they created a process with governance around it to ensure that the $5 million was preserved, but additional value is being driven. So now you've got an ally in the marketing department instead of tension, and you've enabled them to do more with the same level of funding, and everybody's winning. So those are when people recognize the opportunities to drive value in those kinds of ways, we're really pushing our organizations forward.
Yeah, so you're no longer a threat, you're an ally.
Yeah, I'm actually an enabler.
Right. Well, Tom, it's time to wrap up. I want to thank you very much for your time in talking to me today. It's been much appreciated. I know that I could have talked a lot longer and asked for a lot more questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put all the links to some of the things we talked about, like the mastery model, and also notes from the show today. They're going to go at artofprocurement.com/Big Idea 2016. I'll also put a link to the Big Idea Summit, and you can find details on how to register there as a digital delegate for the event, which is on April 21st. So, Tom, once again, thank you very much for your time.
It was my pleasure. I'll look forward to talking to you again in the future.
No, definitely, Tom. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.